Hi there, it's Michael Palladini, aka Macgyver, to all my YouTube friends. Give me a toothpick and a paper clip and I'll build you a shopping mall. Today what we're working on is a 1998 Ford F150 with the 4.2 liter V6, and it had a multitude of codes throwing the check engine light on, and two of which were for the right and left intake manifold runner control system. Now what this V6 engine has is essentially two intake manifolds built into one. One has a long air passage for low end torque, boost low end torque, and then it switches over to a shorter intake path when the engine is up to speed and you're cruising down the road. So you get the best out of both worlds. Historically, V6s have been a little lacking in the torque department, so that's one of the ways they tried to compensate. Well, this vehicle has a what's called an intake manifold runner control system. And I will zoom in there. That little actuator there with the vacuum line, blue vacuum line coming in the top, and there. And on the back of each one of those little cans is a sensor that tells the computer that it actually did what it's supposed to do when it's commanded. So, and then you have two ports for each cylinder, a short port and a long port, and then of course that matches up with the top half of the intake manifold there. And down inside each one of these, inside here, you can see there's a little flap butterfly valve in there, and that will be either open or closed depending on the needs of the engine. Well, that feature wasn't functioning, so what we had to do, typically you have one or two of those actuators going bad, or there's a little plastic damage on the linkage back there that occasionally gets hot and brittle and breaks, and then the little actuator arm falls out. That's typically what happens. Now, neither of those were the case on this vehicle. If you'll notice on the firewall here, you'll see a dent, and that's where they had put a replacement engine in here, and when you bring the engine in, you accidentally bang it against the firewall as it's going in, because to get inside this hood, the engine has to be tilted very radically to get down in there. So that tells me this has had an engine put in it, or had some major engine work, and which was verified by the owner. But what we did was we went ahead and traced the vacuum lines back from those actuators. They go to a controller, which is down in here, okay, where engine manifold vacuum has a little electric switch on it, and it switches it on or off to make those actuators work. Well, if you trace those vacuum lines all the way back, you'll find that they come up right here behind the battery, and lo and behold, it's broken. And it's a hard plastic line. So in the grand scheme of things, as difficult as it was to find, that's pretty good, because that's very inexpensive for the owner of the vehicle. Now we're going to patch that up and put the intake back together and clear the codes and drive it a little bit and see if the code comes back. So onward and upward. Okay, so I've going back with the intake, put that upper intake, putting that back on. One of the things I noticed, or a couple things, one was one of these bolts was missing on the intake, so we're going to be heading off to the parts house trying to find a replacement bolt. I don't think it was a huge deal, you know, as far as like a vacuum leak or anything like that, but regardless, it needs to be there, so we're going to hunt one down and put it back in place. And another thing we had was underneath here, very difficult to see. Put some light on that for you. Let's see, where is it? Right there, you can see where I have the two little zip ties. There's a vacuum line that goes into the intake manifold, and that rubber boot was not fitting tightly on that vacuum nipple there. So we had to give it a little help with a zip tie there, and we're giving it a little extra support on the top of the intake there to hold it up. That little part is impossible to find. I don't even know that it's available to be gotten at the dealer without it being some kind of weird special order. So you just kind of have to try and make do in a situation like that. But in this case, that's a totally acceptable repair. It seals and it will stay and hold up, so it's not like a jury rig or anything. Okay, so after some searching and lots of driving around, I found a reasonable facsimile to this bolt, and that'll make sure we don't have any vacuum leaks due to that one bolt being missing. So we're gonna get cracking here and get this thing back together and see if we've cured that one code, and then we'll move on to the next ones. Well, we're just about done with it. We're going to go ahead and run the scan tool on it and run it through all its tests, and then we're going to run it through its drive cycle so the owner can take it and get it inspected without fear of that dreaded check engine light from popping back on. We've got it pretty well squared away now. We ended up having to put an alternator on it, tested the alternator, and it was only putting out 11.5 volts, which kind of made it act kind of weird for the owner, because every now and then, you know, he'd get out there and it just wouldn't start. And of course, a trained ear could listen and tell that the battery was, you know, not being charged fully, but you know, the owner just knew that it either started or it didn't. So, but she's all back together, running real nice, no immediate check engine light, so that's a good thing. And we're going to go inside the car with the scan tool. Okay, so what I'm going to be using, my tool of choice here, is the Autel Macgyver DS708, and that will allow me to run all of the Ford specific tests on the computer, way more capable of what you know, your typical scan tool that you buy from the parts store will do. This is more akin to the actual tool that the dealer would have in their shop. The tool I used to use before this, and I still do on occasion because sometimes it's easier, and I like this tool because it tells me with a real easy to read green, yellow, or red as to what the drive cycle status is, as far as you know, if you just clear the codes and go try and get your car inspected, they'll fail you, because the computer has to go through what's called its drive cycle monitors which is a whole bunch of little tests that it does every now and then under various conditions, and one of which is you know, key on off cycles, you know, so the truck has to be, or the car has to be stopped and started so many times and driven so many miles, and you know, under varying load conditions and stuff. And that's the thing I like about this, because I can plug it in and bang, it's right there. You know, if it's green, I know it's been through all of its tests and it passed. So if it's yellow, it means it hasn't finished all the tests yet. And if it's red, that means there's a code or something that's going to prevent it from going green. So, you know, so it's handy. Now this one's not one that you can get at most parts stores. It's a little more advanced than that. It's like the big brother to the ones at the parts store. This one runs about $400. It's the Innova 31703, and it says it has, you know, ABS and airbags and all that, but it's really not that capable. You know, if you're going to get into that kind of stuff, you really need this tool here. So anyway, now you've had your education on scan tools. Let's get in the truck and hook this puppy up and go through some tests. All right, so we're going to take it out and run it down the road a little bit to get everything up to temperature. You know, engine has to be warmed up, and catalytic converters have to be up to operating temperature and all before we can run any tests. The engine appears to be idling a lot smoother. That's probably due to all the vacuum leaks I found when we were taking the intake off, and all the various, you know, rotten rubber hoses and such like that you know, you invariably find when you're working on a vehicle like this with this many miles on it. And of course, you just go through and fix them as you go, and it made a world of difference in the way it runs. It it wasn't terrible, but it, you know, you could tell it kind of had a choppy idle. The owner may have dismissed it as, you know, age. You know, we all get a little choppy when we get older. But it's idling very smoothly now, and so we're going to take it down the road a little bit and see how she does. My incredibly long, incredibly bumpy driveway. One day I'll be able to maybe hit the lottery and get it paved. You know, my driveway's like, what, 1,200 feet long, 1,300 feet. So it's kind of like Crocodile Dundee said about being in his backyard out there in the outback. He says, you can see him coming.